Today I'm going to show you my process on how to make a reclaimed wood console table. I'm using these 100-year-old beams that were previously rafters that were taken down from a barn in eastern Ontario. These beams have a taper to them. On one end it measures 4 inches by 4 inches, and on the other it's 5.5 inches by 4 inches. So we're off to the miter saw to get these beams cut to size. The console was intended to be 48 inches long by 32 high. Some of you may have picked up on the word was, and that's because, well, something happened and I had to readjust. Stay with me, it's about to get interesting. Despite it being a 12-inch miter saw, it didn't quite cut through the entire beam, so I had to use my flush trim saw that you see me using here to finish off the cut. I'm cutting 4 pieces at 32 inches long for the legs, and then I'm cutting 2 pieces that are 43 inches long for the top. Here I'm marking off each beam to know which ones get paired together. Most of the barnwood that I come across has a bunch of nails in it, and before I can work with it I need to either remove the nails or drive them in further. So I use an old flathead screwdriver, a pair of vice grips, and a hammer to pull out the nails that are sticking out. For the nails that I want to drive in further into the wood, I use a combination of an air punch and just a standard punch that you tap with a hammer. If you're using reclaimed wood that has a lot of nails in it, this is probably going to be the most time-consuming part of the project. So now it's time to join these beams together, passing it on the jointer. I am like praying that I don't hit a nail. The part on the jointer went well, no nails were hit, but you'll see what happens in the video a little later. Now that my beams are jointed and fit nicely together, it's time to do the glue up. And I'm simply going to use some wood glue to bring these beams together. Once dry, the glue creates a super strong bond. When they say a woodworker can't have enough clamps, that is the truth. I like to use pipe clamps. They're pretty cheap and they work really well. The next day I removed the beams from the clamps, and because of that taper in the beams to begin with, the top ended up being 3/4 of an inch wider than the legs. So I just had to cut off 3/4 of an inch using my circular saw and a straight edge. All right, so here's where it gets really fun. So I wanted to connect the top to the legs using dovetails. And in hindsight, I should have gone about this completely differently. I used the circular saw and the bandsaw to make the tail, and I've got to say this was not the easiest way to go about it. Just the length of this beam and how heavy it was and uneven, it was really difficult to get it through the bandsaw. So next time I do this, I'm likely gonna go with my jigsaw and just a longer blade. It's just gonna be so much easier. And this is the part where this project takes a turn for the worst. So what happened here was the beam slipped out of my hand and fell. The tail cracked. Kind of sucks. I was thinking about gluing it, but I wasn't sure that was going to work and be strong enough as I then tried to insert that part into the tail socket and legs. So I decided just to come up with a plan B. So after I got over myself, I moved on to plan B, which was just to create a simple butt joint. And to do that, I just had to remove the tail part of the dovetail. This is where it got kind of interesting because I did in fact hit a nail. And just look at this. Fire. It just came out from the back of the miter saw, and there was a lot of sawdust there, so I was kind of worried that some of the sparks would ignite the sawdust. So I just had to do a real quick cleanup and then take this bucket outside and dump it in my burn bin. And here's the nail. Yeah, I got it right down the center. Sliced it. That's crazy. But look, it was hard to take out even so, it's just coming off in little pieces. There we go. I decided to notch out the top of the legs to support the tabletop a little better. The dust collection chute on my miter saw was getting in the way of making the cut, kept on hitting in the beam, so I decided to use my track saw to do this. I use a hammer and a chisel to remove the majority of the pieces, and then I'll take my router just to clean up that joint a little better. I'm now going to use my sander with 120 grit sandpaper just to remove some of the marks that the router left. Now it's time to make this thing pretty, so I'm using a restorer tool with a nylon wheel just to clean up the old wood. The nylon wheel will remove the dirt and any of the loose fibers and splinters without disturbing the original character of the wood. I'm drilling 3/4 inch holes, 1 inch deep, to counterbore the structural screws I'm going to use to hold the legs to the top. And eventually I'm going to fill the hole with some plugs I'm going to use from the same wood. Before assembling everything, I'm just going to add some glue in the joint. With the help of a clamp, it's time to screw the legs to the top. I'm using really long screws here. They're structural screws by GRK. I wanted to get shorter ones, but they didn't have them, so I think these ones are like 6 inches long. Here's a long shot of that screw. Yeah, 6 inches is way too long. 4 inches would have been perfect. So now that the simple assembly is done, it's time to stain it. And what I want to do first is address the fresh cut areas because they are lighter and I want to make it blend in more with the rest of the barnwood. So I'm using a Danish oil that is tinted dark walnut. To finish this piece, I decided to go with equal parts of boiled linseed oil, varnish, and mineral spirits. After applying the finish and letting it dry, I realized that this wasn't really the color I wanted to go with. Now I knew that the oil was going to bring out the redness, that rich patina in the wood, but after seeing the piece all done, I realized I just liked the color of the raw wood itself. So I'm sanding her down. You'll notice I didn't plug the holes on the side of the console, and that's because the store is out of stock on 3/4 inch plug cutters. So once they get those in, I'll be able to make the plugs and fill the holes. All right, so time to apply the finish, and hopefully for the last time, I decided to go with a clear paste wax. And I was so happy with how it turned out. The finish is so smooth, the color is fantastic, it's exactly what I wanted. This was an easy build, but yet so much went wrong. And I learned so much in the process. And that's what I just love about woodworking. Thanks for sticking around and watching all my struggles. I'll see you on the next one.